Sir, one of the objectives, if not stated, has been demanded by many, is to also introducing the bill like this, is to bring about a corporate democracy in some form. But we are sorry that the bill is introduced not in a very democratic fashion, but it is now to replace an ordinance which was issued earlier. Even though the merit of the bill, we really welcome it, because this is in the long-term interest of development of the capital markets. In fact, the Patel Committee had also recommended, which went into reforms of capital markets, that a measure like this should be initiated. In fact, I think our Honorable Finance Minister is lucky and fortunate that he has also been a forerunner of demanding that such measure should be introduced in the capital market, and now he is the one who is going to pilot it. We certainly welcome a system like this, but would have liked it to be a part of overall investor protection mechanism. We would have liked this bill to be introduced as a package and not in a piecemeal form in the fashion in which it is introduced now. The small investors who have been facing a real problem, that they share the transport after 6 months and probably they don't know where to go in case they want to make a complaint against the company or the share registrars who are supposed to transfer the shares. The FIIs have been demanding that paperless trading and scriptless trading should take place in the shortest possible time to facilitate transfer of funds which they bring into the country. Of course, we need more FDI, but probably we don't discourage, or we should not at this particular time only discourage portfolio investment either. Though this investment protection should have come in the form of a larger investment protection, small investor protection bill, which I will request the Honorable Finance Minister to introduce in the shortest possible time. The bill proposes a dual system. It is not mandatory on the part of an investor to necessarily opt for it. It's a voluntary action that he can initiate, and there is not going to be a compulsory depository system to be introduced in the country. I think if you are really proposing avoiding of some sort of repeat of something like scam, I think it is high time that we also introduce this as a compulsory measure, and maybe in a shortest possible time, so this duality of system doesn't exist for a long time to come. On the 20th of September 1995, I think the bill was introduced, and my learned friend had to speak 3 times on this, and I hope he doesn't have to speak on it for the 4th time, and I'm sure Mr. Chidambaram must have taken care that this bill is passed now in Rajya Sabha if it is first passed in Lok Sabha. I would like to, by reserving, as I said earlier, it should have been introduced maybe through another forum and not as a replacement of the ordinance, would like to comment on some of the points that have been mentioned here. How are you going to ensure that the depository who is going to act, we have already stipulated that there is an entry barrier for a depository to start a business. The entry barrier is 100 crores. But there is nothing like capital adequacy. Though there is a minimum capital requirement, if suppose the business of the company grows and it becomes say 10,000 crores, is it going to be linked to the quantum of business and then he is required to increase his capital correspondingly? Like in case of banks, now you have, as per the Basel Committee norms, that 8% of the capital adequacy is required related to the risk-weighted assets. Is it going to be something like this going to be stipulated? Or it's only an entry barrier that is stipulated in the form of 100 crores? Second point is we have a spread of investors who are now in the weights and beats of the country, right from smallest of village in Gujarat. The people really put in their hard-earned money. A depository, is it going to be operating at a national depository, or is going to operate maybe from a place like Mumbai, and which is a financial center of the country, and then it debars many of the small investors to participate into that venture? So only it's going to be a metro-based depository, or we are going to make it mandatory for all depositories to have some regional offices so that the small investors could also access the depository in the event of need. What are going to be the inbuilt precautions is very important. There is we can always have audit, but audit is always post facto, which can only tell us what has gone wrong and why it has gone wrong. But probably prevention is better than cure, and so having an inbuilt system which would prevent a fraud or any sort of a hoodwinking of the system what type of precautions are going to be taken. In case of banking sector, there was a Rangarajan committee which went into computerization of banks even before bank actually went into computerization. So is it something like this which is going to be available to the depositories as a form of advisory mechanism which will ensure that the system is not hoodwinked or manipulated? What form of certificate to be issued? Because there is no mention on that. For instance, any person opting to go to a depository and he says that my shares now would be only with the depository, is he entitled to have a certificate that, and on what is the periodicity of it, and is it mandatory on the part of the depository to issue such certificate only to the shareholder, or even some other person also could obtain such a certificate, is something which is not really very clearly mentioned in the bill. What is in case of prevailing system now, the companies who maintain the share transfer, they undertake the responsibility for share transfer. That information, no, but that has to be mentioned. It's not mentioned. Is it really going to be available to anybody or to somebody? Because it's a question of my share certificate. Anybody who will get the information. That is something which needs to be known. That has not been mentioned at all. Sir, right now under the present system, the cost of transfer of shares, etc., is made by the company itself. Though there are share registrars, it is not really passed on to the person, the shareholders. What is the dispensation, what is contemplated under the new system is not mentioned. Would the depositories be entitled to charge to the shareholders or not is something which needs to be properly mentioned. Sir, SEBI is going to be the regulator of this one more body which is going to be created. The SEBI, when it was formed, we all thought that the problems of small investors are now over. But SEBI, in his own report, has said that it's not possible for them to really look after the investors' interest primarily because there is no adequate law, provisions in the law which allows them to do that, and also they don't have enough machinery. The same SEBI is going to be also burdened with the additional responsibility of looking after this function. Would the finance minister clarify whether SEBI would be really equipped to handle such additional responsibility with the present staff that is available at their disposal? So there is also a provision which allows an investor, when a shareholder, he could also go to the depository and say that I would not like to continue with you and I would like to opt out of it. Some such provision I don't think is really desirable, because ultimately our idea should be to move towards complete scriptless trading in India, and giving an opportunity like this to an investor also means that there is going to be a dual system which is going to exist for a long time to come. I am glad that one provision has given exemption from the Stamp Duties Act. So this transaction would not attract stamp duty. Suppose if the state government, this is what is the provision of the central government, if the state governments would like to impose stamp duty on such transactions, would it debar the state governments from doing so? Or if so, the loss accruing to the state governments, would the central government take the responsibility to make for it? Is something, a clarification I would like to seek from the Honorable Finance Minister. Sir, under the Companies Act, whether this depositories or the notified depository information available with them, would it be treated as a public document under the Companies Act as is defined under the Companies Act, is something also needs to be clarified. Sir, this 100 crores minimum capital as is stipulated by the SEBI guidelines is not in the body of the Act itself. I would request that maybe it should be made as a part of a statutory provision which requires that the depository, when it starts, you would have a minimum capital of 100 crores. Now another question is, in this 100 crores, are we going to allow any foreign participation? And if so, up to what extent, they also could be clarified by the Honorable Finance Minister. In India, we really don't have a central depository system in existence as of now. There is, of course, SGL account which was managed by the Public Debt Office of the Reserve Bank of India, but that was manually done, and in fact that was one of the reasons for arising of the stock scam. So I am sure we cannot really go in for a situation like that, and we need to really define and find out how, to what extent, who is going to bring in the technical know-how that is necessary, and if foreign investment is going to come in, are we going to also insist on probably some technical know-how in that? Sir, another point that needs to be clarified is who could start this business of depository? That's right. Yes. 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 That is what is contemplated. And that is what is necessary. That is in my opinion. Sir, is it going to be made mandatory? Who could start a business of a depository? Could the companies themselves could start, because the companies were always required to have a separate registrar if they wish to, or they could have their own department for share transfers. Is it going to be made mandatory that those companies, to avoid a conflict of interest, the depository is going to be a separate body and will not have what is going to be the pattern of shareholding to ensure that it acts as a neutral body, is something which also probably needs to be clarified. Sir, National Stock Exchange, when it was started, it also has a system, inbuilt system of something which they can also start their own depositories. Are we contemplating making NEC as one of the depositories of central depository sort of a mechanism? Is also probably Honorable Finance Minister could give information to us as a point of information. Sir, is it possible that we have been always hearing and we have been also being worried about various complaints that we receive from various investors